I look wan.
One?
Like a sickly Victorian child.
Oh.
A shiny sickly Victorian child.
Okay.
I have the fever. Welcome to InBits, the podcast that deconstructs our digital lives. I'm Nicola.
And I'm Liam, and we're both lecturers in IADT in psychology and cyber psychology.
So Liam, what are you in bits about today?
I'm less so in bits, but more I want to... Yeah, I know. I've less of a
surprise.
complaint. It's because this is actually kind of happy. Yeah, I want to talk about how older adults use technology. The negative part of this, or the reasoning for this, is they're often viewed to be less tech literate, less capable, and as a result of this, they're sometimes disenfranchised.
Yes.
I'm going to talk about a lot of different research, barriers, opportunities for older adults in terms of technology in the digital age. And I hate that term, the digital age. The digital age happened a long time ago, but we still talk about it like it's this big ethereal thing. So it's an important topic. So the first stat I'm going to give you, we're probably 20 seconds in, is that in 2024, there were 806,300 older adults in Ireland.
What are we counting as older adults? Because I remember with horror, the social support episode where I was an older adult and I didn't like it.
So this is 65 years and older. Okay. 806,300 people. That's a huge amount.
Well, yeah, considering the population of Ireland is what, like 4.5 million or something. So it's...
But I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. So our population is aging and the way we view technology is starting to change too. So, Nick, do you think technology is designed for older adults?
No, not specifically. There are some technologies designed for older adults. I think there's some things about technology that make it more difficult for older adults to use it. And frankly, everyone to use it, but younger people just kind of are maybe more flexible.
Some are. Okay. Some are, but surveys generally and research generally with older adults, so this is 65 and above, they feel like emerging technologies are not designed for them. They're not accessible for them. And often they're not actually affordable.
Yeah, well, I just bought a new Mac, so I can fully understand that problem.
Yeah, that's just, yeah.
Yeah.
So the CES conference showcased a number of different pieces of technology. One that they did highlight was Tombot. Can you see this lovely image?
I can. So Tombot is a little robot dog, but he's covered in fur. So he looks like a dog teddy bear. I suppose sort of golden retriever, golden lab-ish in style.
I was going to say, you haven't told us the dog breed, the important part.
I know, yeah. Sort of like golden, soft.
Puppy retriever.
Very cute, yeah.
Yeah. And they have like gestures. They look typically a smiley, happy dog.
Okay, cool.
Tombot is supposed to console and provide support, and the research does support this, that it can be a soothing aid with people who have dementia.
Yeah.
They were ranging right from Tombot at this conference to in-toilet gadgets for urine testing. Urine testing, in this sense, it's kind of gross, but also really important at the same time. A significant impact on an older adult's health is urinary tract infections, and the actual relationship they have with dementia or misdiagnosis of dementia is also really important.
Yeah.
So I'm not a medical doctor, but that's one fact I do actually know.
Yeah.
And they're christening this technology now as age tech. So they're putting this kind of positive slant on it, but they're talking about this in terms of older adults living and aging within the home, because there's obviously all those trains.
So supports for them.
Yeah. And particularly a lot of this is focused on the United States rather than within Europe. And the United States is particularly experiencing an older adult crisis in terms of healthcare, and they're trying to support older adults to age at home.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are those two. Now, in terms of smart tech or age tech, as it's now christened, this market is important. If I am over the age of 50 and above, this is worth 120 billion.
Jesus Christ.
This is a lot of money we're talking about here. If we look at the proportion of older adults, so I said it was just over 806,000 older adults in Ireland over the age of 65, that is continuing to grow. And it is growing faster than younger adults are growing.
Yeah.
And it is growing faster than adolescents are also growing. So we're going to continue to see this shift and continue to increase. Now, there isn't some other pieces of tech that they announced at this conference. They have a smart lipstick.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's an artificial intelligence lipstick that helps people as they get older. So when their vision is impaired,
Or their hands are shaking,
or their
maybe,
hands are
or
shaking.
something.
Yeah.
So it's not like Homer's makeup gun.
No, it's not the
More
Homer's makeup
sophisticated
gun.
version.
So it basically helps them to steady their hand and results in
That's
less
kind of cool,
makeup
actually.
mishaps.
I could probably do that too.
But I like that in terms of like self-esteem and perceptions of body image. It's not just that you're aging and declining. And now we're starting to see very kind of modern technologies being integrated in. Whether the smart lipstick is actually accessible.
Yeah. It's like, how much does that cost?
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll put that in some show notes. So the creators of Smart Lipstick said, we believe that beauty is for all, and this is what we're trying to achieve with this kind of technology. So this, we can see positive aspects of aging and decline, comfort in terms of dimension, some of these bots, and obviously there's a huge incentive in terms of the amount of money.
The tiny cynical part of me is like, God, the beauty industry won't even let you alone when you get really old. Maintain your beauty standards.
Yeah,
women.
but what if you want to maintain your beauty standards?
I do think it's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, we'll flash forward to like 40 years' time and Nicola has a smart lipstick.
I could probably do it now. It's not my best skill, let's say.
So this is how we're designing technology for older people. Let's actually look at how older people interact with technology. So like flip the interaction lens. Depending on the research you read, again, an older adult is 45 and above. Different researchers use different age categories. So like middle, late and adulthood. This is from a developmental perspective. Good news, mostly this is 65 plus.
It's fine for now.
Okay. So
I've got a while yet.
So are you a tablet user?
Yep.
Okay, so older adults, this is a piece of research that looked at how they use tablets. One of the significant barriers to them actually using them is a lack of knowledge, then followed by confidence, and then cost is still hugely important.
They're expensive, yeah.
They also looked at things like if they had feelings of lower digital self-efficacy, so how confident I am in my technology use. And they found that older adults are motivated to adopt technology, particularly around areas like information seeking. What do you think?
I mean, I can understand that. When you think about the ways that we use interactive technology now, like tablets and stuff, there's a lot of motions of different kinds of swiping that do things and stuff, even trackpads on computers and stuff, that aren't necessarily intuitive, and there are rarely instructions to tell you how to do it. And so you've got to learn by feel. And for someone who's not used to that, that could be, I think, quite off-putting and feel like everything's difficult. And then the OS gets updated and they change everything again. So it makes it tricky.
Yeah, let's go there. But this creates some kind of stigma and some of the stereotypes that we have, where it's like my experiences with like my parents, like I'm going to talk about my great aunt as an example in a little bit. With all of these, they get a new device, they learn how to use them, and something changes, or there's intuitive aspects of where technology has grown and changed. So a young child is going to interact with a touchscreen device and just know that that is normal, rather than the various different iterations of mouse that we've had over the years. Or haptic feedback. All of these obviously change. This creates a stereotype where we think that older people sometimes cannot use these devices.
And it's not that.
But it isn't. So they absolutely can learn how to use some of these devices. I think this is particularly important when it comes to older adults and technology, because it's not just about like, here's a device, go and use. It's actual knowledge, which is tangible as well, not just here's a manual, go and use this.
Yeah, it's here's these things that you specifically want to do. Let's show you how to use those and learn how to use those.
And then really importantly, building that self-efficacy so that they can actually use these with confidence and experience. So as we start to see things like banking services reduce, so I met one of my older neighbours not too long ago in the bank, and they were like, what are you doing here? Are you not using everything online? And I kind of laughed to myself and I was like, why are you here? Because I wouldn't have thought that she particularly would have needed to come into a bank branch.
I don't think anyone, well, there's nothing in there anymore for a start. And so there's only very specific things people have to go in for anymore. Like, I don't remember the last time I was in a branch.
But after the recession and COVID, the way in which we bank has dramatically changed. But older people have not necessarily been, and I don't want to, like the language I was about to use was being brought along with it. And this is that they have to be kind of tugged along with technology changing. Why is there not digital training for older people in terms of how they actually engage with that banking system. So this does have an impact, and they can start to feel particularly left behind by their banking community.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fear and concern around, obviously, something so important like money.
Yeah. And I think that applies in so many areas, like government, interacting with the government in so many ways now. It's really strongly encouraged to do it online. There's often another way, like a phone call or an office that you can go into, but it's made so much more difficult to do that. And the online way is the easier way. And I think that really impacts on people.
But it also isn't always necessarily the way to fix something. A lot of service providers say, oh, you can reach us in our online space to do whatever. And this is premised by this is how long our wait times are going to be.
Yeah.
And people feel disenfranchised by it too. That actual same older female neighbour of mine that I was talking about, she doesn't have an email address.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she spoke about this quite a bit, about how she doesn't receive kind of community information.
Yeah.
I eventually helped sign her up to, and she's in her 90s, just to be clear. So she's not kind of 65 or anything close, but I helped to sign her up to like water notifications, electricity notifications of when stuff was going to be turned off, so she'll get a text message of them.
Yeah.
And even that process is not straightforward.
No.
And there's several steps that are required, like you have to put in like your air code, which is your postcode for some of these, and then you've like an additional text step to go and find some of those too. Okay. So there's a number of these kind of barriers. This leads me to why my main point is that technology adoption isn't always necessarily easy. There was research that was conducted in Spain, and they found that if you had a positive attitude and willingness to use technology, these are your key factors to actually adopting that tech. The prejudice or the stigma that we have in terms of technophobia being a significant barrier isn't actually it. It's a lack of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So if we're trying to provide assurances to people who to use technology, it's just information that's the key here.
Yeah.
This suggests that the right training is important. So not just here's training that is suitable for everyone. These are the specific tools that you will need to use this device based off your needs. Unfortunately, this doesn't actually happen very much. This positive attitude does make a difference. So the AARP, so this is a lovely acronym, the American Association of Retired Persons, AARP, they did a survey and they found that nearly 2/3, so 66% of respondents, it was only quite a small sample, 3,600 adults, they say that technology aids them in their life and makes this easier, which is obviously kind of fair enough. They're using more technology for financial services, social lives, health, wellness, and 6 out of 10 of them have some form of smart device in their home. Security, utilities, appliances, lighting, right the way through from like Ring doorbells to Alexa being in their home.
Yeah.
We do see this. Now, these safety devices are almost half of those participants. These are not devices that were originally designed for everyone in mind, and they don't necessarily have features for older adults either.
Yeah.
With these devices, and I'm going to touch on this later on. Did you hear the news about Alexa, by the way?
No.
So Alexa is now no longer going to have a muted mic mode.
What?
Yeah.
It's listening all the time.
It's going to start to listen all the time for marketing purposes for their new version.
Oh, fuck off.
I'm not sure if how it's going to work under European law.
Yeah, that won't be allowed under European law. Sure.
We're going to come back to that.
I refuse to have any of these things in my house. I have Siri turned off and everything. I won't let my husband have it either.
But I was particularly thinking about this in terms of older adults when they're talking about their banking information or they're on their phone,
or
any private conversation that they may not potentially be aware of, and then this being used as directed marketing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm getting down a negative path, and I said I wouldn't do
and
that
then
straight away.
like we know that data breaches happen, so then scammers will find their data, and yeah, it's great. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it does. When we look at how older adults are using tech for specific purposes, so staying in touch with family is a really common one, specifically using kind of tablets. My great aunt it's also in her 90s, ironically, and she uses a tablet for video calls. She orders her groceries through it. She does quite a bit with it.
Yeah.
And that's because her vision isn't the best, so she tries to avoid kind of any potential risks there. So we may not use all of the features of a device. So we don't need full instructional leaflets and pamphlets. So this was research that looked at specifically at training, and it had to be designed for their specific needs.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge that's there is how do we know what their specific needs are always going to be?
And we have to give them the potential to grow those needs. So they may be looking for it to do their banking and video calls and shopping. But then as they get more used to the tablet, they might want to start doing other stuff like book themselves trips or book tickets for museums or concerts or whatever. And then that training needs to be expanded, and that self-efficacy will help with that, I think.
And these are all just isolated to devices. Okay. Now, you're from a design background. Design matters. Persuasion matters. We've spoken about persuasion quite a bit. So let's talk website design. Do you think that websites are designed for older adults in mind?
Well, government websites have to be accessible. So they're designed so that you can increase the size of type and things like that. But like a lot of websites are just really bloody hard to use no matter what age you are. Like apparently I'm an older adult in some classifications. But some websites are just confusing and some are really well designed. So I think it depends.
Okay. And it does depend. It depends on the features of the website. The classic features of things like white space design, they still matter. Digital assistants are important. So digital assistants are on every single website we almost interact with. There was a piece of research by Chatterman et al. And they looked at shopping websites specifically with older samples of participants. And they found that digital assistants with a socially orientated interaction style. So they're looking for social outcomes, things that they're going to encourage that specific use.
So what are digital assistants then?
In this scenario, a digital assistant is anything from like a chatbot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So encouraging them for particular products based off their own needs and preferences from when they signed up to their accounts.
I wondered who used those bloody chatbots because I hate them. I wondered why they were on every shopping site that I go to.
But sometimes they are helpful.
Are they?
Yeah.
I have never used one on a shopping site. But that's interesting.
But if they focused on tailored outcomes to their needs, they had greater trust in that website.
Okay, interesting.
But only if you had higher internet competency and digital skills in the first place.
Okay.
So distrust is still there.
Yeah.
If we had lower internet competency, we actually looked for one that was task orientated. And this always reminds me of like men and women when they shop. So
no idea what you're talking about.
So task orientated, go in, get the product, leave, as opposed to the social aspect of enjoying browsing as well.
Yeah.
You're smirking at me like this is an attack. It's not an attack.
I know. I hate that I fall into the gender stereotype, but I fully do.
So what is really important here is it finally gives us information which is research-based for older adults that says this must be a tailored experience. And we need to consider the varying internet level of those users. So tailored digital assistants can improve that online experience specifically for an older adult.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Now, what about your phone?
What about my phone?
Yeah, so
I never use it, as you know. Very low screen time.
So more than 70% of older Irish adults own a smartphone.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Actually, it kind of surprises me that's low.
I think it's quite low.
Yeah.
Typical older analog phones are still potentially being circulated there.
Yeah.
I still think it's probably a bit low.
I think that's low, yeah.
There is research on this around smartphone use and what are the positive aspects of it. So I'm staying positive.
Go you.
Yeah, I know.
Unlike
we
me.
need it. Busch et al., they had a sample of older adults in Norway. Again, these are 65 plus. And they found that loneliness was the strongest predictor of kind of use for a smartphone and the emotional gain that comes as a result of that use.
Yeah.
Social media is the most prevalent behavior, then help seeking. So it's actually kind of social capital bonding, bridging used firstly, then it's the feelings of loneliness.
Okay, that's really interesting.
How important do you think they are for social connection?
I would say quite important. Like when you look at what happened during COVID, I think more older people learned how to use them for different purposes that they hadn't been using them for. Like some already had because families are more dispersed. But I think some people have kept that up and realized the potential of it. So yeah, I'd say it's quite important. I think physical community is also really, really important for older adults to actually come together and do things. But I do think it can be really useful for staying in touch, particularly if like you're not well and you can't get out as much and stuff. I think it's probably really, really useful for that.
But I think even just kind of connection to family, friends, anyone who you care about, but it does help to reduce feelings of loneliness or isolation. So there's research from Spain. This specifically looked at the communication of older adults and their use of emojis. Okay. If you have anyone who's an older adult in your life, think of the emojis that they currently use. They found that older adults have difficulty interpreting sarcastic content by comparison to a younger adult and the emojis that are used.
Yeah. Especially because the differences across generations and how emojis are used and their meaning and stuff. Yeah, that makes sense.
So if we use an emoji, for example, like a winky face, that could help to improve someone's understanding. Something that's a little bit more overt.
Yeah.
If it is too subversive or like
has multiple
emoji,
meanings or anything. Yeah.
like the emoji that's like the smiley face that's upside down.
Yeah.
It's just like if I use that
What does that mean?
if I use that with someone who might be potentially older, they might just not understand anything that's happening there. So in terms of emoji differences, do you think there are specific emojis that might be easier for older adults to use?
I think they're more likely to use them in straightforward ways, like more the overt meaning of them rather than the layers of meaning that young people have. Like they're more likely to use a laughing emoji to say that they're like laughing at something.
Yeah.
Whereas young people are more likely to use a skull.
Okay.
And crossbones to say they're dead.
Yeah.
Laughing.
But like the predictive text or the context of some of the emojis, so semantic and latent meanings. So the semantic ones will come out straight away. The latent meanings of an emoji, they're not typically used as much by an older adult because of the sarcastic or the cultural context or time-bound context of the emoji that's being used. But they can be used to also bridge the gap between generations.
Yeah.
So being viewed as kind of younger, and I did just use air quotes for that. So being viewed as younger or more cool by the fact that they're just simply using emojis. Okay.
Yeah. We're demonstrating the fact that we are not young by using the word cool.
Yeah. Whatever.
We had a conversation with my dad about emojis because he was wondering like why we keep putting them and stuff, and we were explaining it, and so now he uses the fox emoji at the end of every single text, which is actually really cute because our last name's Fox. But he doesn't really use other ones all that much, just the fox emoji.
My mum is very fond of the facepalm emoji.
No, that's one of my faves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these, or the emoji used between younger people and older people, or older adults, if we keep calling them older adults, this fosters and encourages digital inclusion. So there is research on digital inclusion, particularly training, surprise again, is the most important for promoting inclusion. So do you think that older adults are getting sufficient training in their tech use?
Some are. Like there are definitely training programs that run, which are fantastic. I think some older adults are easier to reach than others. So ones who are like quite involved in community groups are more likely to get that training than people who are quite isolated. And so some of the people who need it most maybe aren't getting it. Like some of the research I was looking at recently on scams and how to help older people avoid getting scammed looked at how you could introduce training through community groups and existing digital training and so on. So there are some networks, like there are support networks already available that a lot of older people are connected into, like the health service and so on. And that's the best route to getting this done because you're not trying to create a new network.
But it's easier to rely on those existing networks because they have trust.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Especially when it comes to some of the negative aspects, which we'll touch on in a bit. But if I'm trying to like encourage someone to start using a new shopping service, access a new service, or a service they currently use is being pushed into a more digital domain or into an app that may not be as easy to use, it has to come from that existing network that's already there to ensure that they're particularly not left behind or feeling that they've been left behind by society.
One of the influences on our prediction of whether we'll use tech or not is whether people around us are using it and positive about it. So if you can surround people by people who are positive about it, they're much more likely to adapt.
And like-minded people.
Yeah, exactly.
Regardless of the research you look at in digital skills training, they all talk about local community centres. So exactly what you've just said. So digital literacy classes in small community environments are much more effective than here's a leaflet or here's some information about a new particular app that they're going to use, because that does not encourage adoption. It has to be within a small, secure setting that is trusted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all the positive, okay? And kind of how we start to use or interact with technology. There's still positive aspects from a mental health perspective, okay? So the reduction of social isolation, increase in autonomy, these empower older adults particularly. So the increased sense of autonomy. Can you think of any other positive impacts?
Like there's so many. My parents are definitely in the older adult. They're over the over 65 group, right? So they're well in that group. But they use technology so much. Like they book all of their, like they travel a lot and they book most of their trips online. They stay in contact with friends and family all around the world, different places, even locally. They keep up to date with people. They use technology for entertainment, to alleviate boredom, for gaming, like so many different ways that are all like really positive things.
Most of the tech that boomers interact with really, or anyone who's in that age category, is the standard tech that everyone else
That we're
is
all
interacting.
using, yeah.
Like Netflix, Prime, all of the kind of streaming services that we do use. And then the tablets, the example I spoke about earlier with my aunt kind of using kind of FaceTime. She prefers FaceTime to WhatsApp videos. She doesn't like to answer WhatsApp videos. She thinks the connection is better. Don't know whether that's actually the case, but she has her own preferences when she starts to use these devices too. So this is both loneliness and information seeking that's in tandem there.
Yeah.
She's also mad for things like Candy Crush. And I'm actually going to talk about gaming and older adults in a little bit because I can't help myself.
Yeah, my dad plays a whole bunch of games on his phone.
Okay.
And thankfully, since he got his hearing aids, the sound mostly goes into those, but it used to be really annoying. It's like beep, 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 beep.
Oh, God. But so there was research conducted, and it's 10 years old now. It's by Cho 2015. And they were looking at communication, social networking apps, and how they predicted or positively predicted bonding and bridging social capital. So how we share with our friends, how we information seek, these have a direct relationship with reducing social isolation. But what I think is interesting is that they found no differences between older and younger participants in that regard. Regardless of age, social networking, the impact and the reduction of social isolation is exactly the same.
That doesn't necessarily surprise me. I think if you are kind of confidently using social media to stay in touch with people and reduce your loneliness, what's more important than your age is your offline network. Like if you're, like my parents are extremely social. They're total social butterflies. They are always out. They're always meeting people. They've got a lot of really, really strong friendships. And most of that is offline, but they obviously stay in touch with lots of people online as well. I think that's more important than their, say, confidence in using social networking to connect with people. They don't really actually, they use WhatsApp and stuff, but not social networks so much. And I think for younger or older people, if you're lonely, that might be the thing that's more important than your age, really.
Yeah. And what I like is that it's showing that there is no difference between an older and a younger user in how they seek information, how they utilize information. We did also see this quite a lot during COVID, where people would start to draw on their networks, particularly when we couldn't have that sense of community. So using those particularly as kind of lifelines, shared connection, trying to seek other people.
Yeah.
Now, I did say I was going to talk about gaming, and I can't help myself again. I found some really interesting research, and it looks at massive multi-online RPGs. So that's a role-playing game in a massive online world. And they were looking at World of Warcraft. So older adults over the age of 65, again, challenging bias. We wouldn't necessarily expect them to be playing World of Warcraft, but yes, they are. The most important finding from that study is that social capital increases.
That's interesting.
So their social connectedness is being increased as a result of gameplay. They found higher levels of bridging social capital in in-game communication, so using the chat functions, again, dispelling some kind of potential stereotypes, and in developing their relationships.
Cool. That's
I really like that.
Yeah, I love that.
Are there any games that you think older adults might play?
This is purely instinct more than anything. And actually, I have looked at some research from one of the big games organizations about who plays what. And I think older adults are a bit more likely to play like puzzle games, like online versions of what they might have enjoyed offline, crosswords, puzzle games, Sudoku, those kinds of things. But I imagine they also play other fun games as well.
Stolen out of my mouth. So they do engage with a lot of these games. Now, these are either social in terms of their purpose or improving cognitive skills.
Yes.
So fun, happy way to interact with each other. So things like online chess, Sudoku, they're really popular puzzle games, which are no longer these traditional static puzzle games that are in like the newspaper that they get. It's instead things like Candy Crush. So colors, interactivity, the things that younger people are seen to be kind of played on in terms of the addictiveness of these games. Older people do the exact same thing. And like, I'm fairly confident that my great aunt who plays all of these, she's like hundreds in terms of the levels. It's crazy, but it shows how much time she spends in it. And it's that social aspect of it too.
Yeah.
But they can help older adults to stay mentally sharp and socially connected at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Finally, some more research that looks at gaming was McCord et al. They found that a different type of game, so outside of puzzle games, so they looked at first-person shooters. So they used Star Wars Battlefront, and they looked at executive function, so decision-making, and how to improve that. And they found that Battlefront would significantly increase working memory and visual attention of the participants who were playing compared to those who weren't. Working memory being that the amount of information I can hold, so similar to like the RAM on a computer, the processing power of our brain and our memory, and storing that information, and then visual attention, so new stimuli coming into contact with you.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me because I know that these kind of games can do that for other age groups. So why would that not happen for older adults as well? Like I remember at the Psychological Society of Ireland Student Congress years ago when I presented back in, God, I don't know what it was, 2011. There was a researcher who presented their research on training the police force for active shooting situations. And they did it through gaming. And they got some of us up on the stage to do a demo, and you weren't supposed to shoot the hostages. You were supposed to shout at the person who had taken the hostages to put their hands up and to check if they had a weapon and stuff. And there were 4 of us up there.
Did you shoot the hostages?
3 of us shot the hostages. I was one of those. Yeah, I do not play games. So okay. I just shot the first person who ran towards me because my heart rate went up. The only person who didn't and who did all the things they were supposed to do was a gamer, because they had better attention to the visual stimuli. They were better able to discern who was hostile, who wasn't, to take a moment to think about things rather than just going, well, there's people running at me and they have guns.
I love that.
They didn't even have guns.
But
we just shot all the hostages.
But gaming does have positive cognitive benefits. Mental stimulation, improving cognitive function, so like the executive function we've spoken about, the working memory. So it's both physical and mental health in terms of older adults.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Now, this voice-assisted evil, okay,
I will not allow my
Alexa,
Yep.
she's going to start to send marketing information. We'll touch on this again later on.
It's so insanely invasive. I cannot believe this.
My concern is how this is used with older adults, because they're showing trends of older adults from the research that they're starting to increase their use of things like Alexa and Google Home. So they found that these devices are being used to support older adults, providing convenience, sense of companionship, help with timers, reminders for tablets, all of these things that they're being used for. That information is now going to be shared. So, I need more time to do a lot more research about this, and then we can come back to how AI is being used within the home, maybe. It's definitely something we need to continue to talk about.
Because I know America's like the Wild West for privacy. It's just insanely bad, but this is just next level.
But they're used for supporting older adults, particularly for physical or cognitive impairments. And now, how is that information going to be used? Because it is particularly sensitive. It's not me using Alexa to turn on a light.
It's to remember what meds to take when.
To remember what meds to take, and then like for those to be specifically marketed to me, or another form of that medication to be marketed to me.
Or more likely, the data will be looked at to say, okay, this person has cognitive decline. They're more likely to fall for these kinds of ads and are more vulnerable.
We're going to have to come back to this, because I want to talk about how they're really helpful.
Well, they would be helpful if they weren't stealing the bloody information from them.
But they are helpful. Let's stick with positive for now.
Okay, right.
So they can be really helpful. So particularly, again, for older adults, but they need specific guidance. So clearer voice commands, better integration with other assistive technologies, these make a significant difference when you look at the research. Now, the problem is, how do you provide supports or training for them to be used? Or how do we get them to be integrated? Because I'm fairly tech savvy, and setting up all of this in my own home is an absolute nightmare.
Oh, really?
It's not straightforward. Maybe it's just me, and maybe I'm just need more help, or maybe I'm approaching an age where I need more support. But
I don't think you're quite there yet.
Thank you. But these are not straightforward. They're not designed, even though they're really helpful, they're not currently designed in that way. So they do help alleviate various different problems. So self-determination, in terms of increasing those. So I'm at home on my own as an older adult, and I do not need someone else to do something for me. I do not need to be reminded by someone else instead. Social participation, and also perceived safety. Like, I know my dad uses the kind of remote Wi-Fi cameras all the time. That gives a sense of safety, but also when he's not at home.
Yeah.
So you can kind of check up on things, relieving senses of anxiety too.
And even things like the voice assistant on your phone, you know, if you fall and your phone's on the table and you can't reach it, you could maybe activate your phone to call emergency services for you. And things like that, I think, are also useful for safety functions as well. And there's also the tracking on phones for if you fall and stuff like that it can actually tell, and it can alert your emergency contacts and stuff. So there's some really useful stuff around safety there.
Yeah, I think they're really, really helpful, to be honest. I think they should be integrated. Now, I'm going to move away from being happy and positive. Okay.
For a change for this podcast, we're going to go off our usual kind of track.
What I will say is that we're more positive than negative for once.
Yes.
So there is a lot of negative impacts of older adults using technology. Some of it comes from the discussion we had earlier about technology not being designed for use, the lack of training, potentially. Digital environments still do pose threats to older adults. And I think threats or increased risk is probably the better phrasing we should use. Yeah. This is because of less digital literacy and experience online.
Yeah.
So experience is really important to teach us how or what potential risks might happen in the outcome of a scenario. So I'm going to engage with a new product or service, and how I evaluate my propensity for trust or the risk that is there from a theoretical perspective is what previous experience do I have that is similar, that it will guide me as to whether I'm making an appropriate decision or not, or a safe decision, or can I trust this person with my information. Older adults are potentially more susceptible to cybersecurity risks, other risks like misinformation and online scams like phishing.
Yeah. And we do know that. But like we're all vulnerable to scams, to be quite honest. Any of us could fall for one at any particular moment where we're distracted or cognitively overloaded or anything like that. And there's such a variety of scams that target different people in different ways. But older adults are maybe less aware of some of the red flags of the online ones in particular. And then as people start to have cognitive decline, they're definitely more vulnerable.
But like, even if you look at something like a romance scam for someone who is bereaved and is lonely and is potentially preyed upon, because it is that kind of aspect, they may not be as aware of the prevalence of romance scams or whether that person is actually a catfished romance scam or not.
We will come back to that. We'll do a whole episode on romance scams and catfishing, I think, and we'll do another one on other scams, because
we can touch on this specifically with older adults, but it's the skills to discern this, to avoid those online threats. Like, I am still on Facebook, try not to use it as much, but most of the users for Facebook are in that older age cohort. And scams through direct messages are one. So we're connected on Facebook. You send me a message and you say, "Hey, I'm locked out of my account. You're going to get a code sent to you. Could you please let me know what that code is?" That scam is very prevalent at the moment. And that is just simply me trying to get access to your password and your account. And I'm waiting for you to send me that either 2FA code or a code that's been emailed to you. And that does happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it happens because we trust the person who is apparently messaging us because they're someone we know.
But the person who's potentially messaging us has breached our network as a result. And we do have already a propensity to trust them.
Yeah.
So there is research that has shown older adults are also more susceptible to misinformation content.
Yes.
This is sometimes because they have a lack of experience with some of those messages that are being shared, particularly evident during COVID, also known as the COVID-19 infodemic. Older adults struggled with the amount of contrasting information that was online and how to potentially verify this information. Knowing where to go, where to fact check was particularly problematic. Can you think of any ways to address that?
I'm sure I can, but interestingly, Ireland does better. Our Irish older adults are better at spotting misinformation than other countries.
I think we're less susceptible because we're like, go away.
Yeah, I know. We're just generally skeptical as a particular nationality.
I have enough bread and toilet paper in the house. I don't need to worry.
So how do we address it? I think, like, a lot of the strategies around misinformation, like fact-checking, tagging, community notes, etc., are useful to a point, but they also have downsides, and they can lead to a problem where information that's not fact-checked or not tagged is viewed as being more true, which it often isn't. It's just that no one's got around to tagging it yet. So I think there's a lot of issues with this in general, like not even for older adults. It's just, this is a huge problem. Education, again, digital skills, again, we always come back to over and over again.
But if we rely on our existing network to fact check or get information or seek new supports with misinformation content, if they're also more susceptible or more likely to fall for that content, and we then go and talk to that person who is that trusted person who's already fallen from that content, as a result of it, we're then more likely to be susceptible as a result. So teaching people how to fact check information, and fact checking is not some like straightforward perspective as well, because often when you go to fact check something, there's a lot of different websites substantiating the fact as being believable when it's actually not. So knowing where to fact check is another layer to this. How to verify a source, how to kind of navigate this from an online perspective. So workshops, digital literacy programs. So I've gone through a plethora of papers on this. So workshops, awareness campaigns, they have to happen in tandem and teach people the differences between real and misleading pieces of information and the different types of kind of misinformation content. So everything from like sloppy journalism and headlines that might be sensationalist to this is a purely like
entirely untrue
text message that is relying on something else, and these are the factors that it looks for. So this is not an easy to solve problem. Now, from a cybersecurity perspective, how do we tackle some of these risks? So we've spoken about phishing a little bit and malware. So these are the two major risks that will occur, more so through online transactions, social media, because we sometimes have limited options. So in terms of malware specifically, do you think there's anything we can do?
Well, it comes back to training again. So all of the research suggests that training, there's some possible tech solutions that aren't quite there yet. There are some that filter out emails better than others, that flag stuff better than others. I think that will get better with AI, hopefully. But it does come back to training, because some stuff's always going to get through. And those digital skills training, like that needs to be frequent as well, particularly for cybersecurity stuff. The effects of it for any group tends to wear off after a period of time. So providing really clear information, and particularly information about what to do if you're uncertain about something, is really important. Like if you're unsure about this email, is it from your utilities company or not? Like how do you check that? How do you go about verifying that? Who can you talk to?
But if you get a text message from your bank and it's actually your bank, you may trust it, but you also may not trust it. Yeah.
I mean, I have called my bank before about a text message they sent me that was actually from them, but looked like a phishing message.
One of my security questions for a bank, and I'll never forget it, was I was on the phone to my bank, and it was my bank, and the security question was, who do you bank with? And I was like, no, I'm hanging up. But that's the skepticism in me, where someone else might give away some of that information. So the kind of phone call based phishing can lead someone to be very susceptible. Now, research across age bands on phishing in terms of susceptibility, older adults are not necessarily more liable to phishing than a younger person is. It actually is, depending on the research you read, says that older adults are better.
Okay, interesting.
So providing clear, accessible information. From a training perspective, images are actually better. So providing someone with a fake phishing email and highlighting the specific areas on it where they can go and check that information, that is more helpful than these are the things you need to look for. Because they may not know what the language or the terminology is.
Honestly, I think that's better for everybody. Like some of the research has shown that if you create a game that allows you to visually spot red flags of stuff and to check different aspects of it for phishing, that's more effective than just telling people about what happens in phishing.
The fun fact from this, is that older adults will typically prioritize their social resources, their social capital, and they will seek out people within their existing network who are experts. And those existing people, those existing people within those networks have poor quality information and actually increase their vulnerability. It's not the older adult that's susceptible. It's the person who's giving them advice. And when that advice is inaccurate, they go and seek support from someone who is younger, who's like, no, that's okay. Especially if they're seeking support from someone who they believe is going to have the most up-to-date information, which might be an adolescent who are, unfortunately, they're the actual group that is most likely to fall for phishing or susceptibility to cybersecurity scams.
And they see more of it because they're more online in general. So,
but this is the problem. It's not older adults that are the issue. It's where they're getting that information from. So that creates a very susceptible environment. Outside of this, it should be a cybersecurity expert, someone who they can trust, an organization like that. Government websites, resources, cybersecurity hotlines, reliable information. Now, there is research by Morrison and colleagues. They were looking at the transition between middle and older age. Okay. And this transition being that we have reduced social interaction, we have financial well-being, feelings of competency, and technological support. So while we have these can actually influence whether we feel safe or not. So we're reading from the same hymn sheet. It's actually education that's key here. So, for example, regular check-ins with family, someone who we can trust and talk to, support groups for older adults to stay informed. So like you're talking about the updated cybersecurity training, that's really helpful. So we've looked at the positive, we've looked at the negative, but there's a specific cybersecurity risk, which is particularly phishing. There is research in this space. They found that older adults can quite easily be manipulated by scammers, stealing information through phishing emails, particularly being the most prominent of all of these methods. Older adults were perceived the risk of phishing emails to be lower, and they were less accurate in evaluating that content. But they're not less accurate than younger people. Okay, so that's the difference. They're still less accurate at differentiating that content. They perceive the risk to potentially be high, so they're still better than younger adults, but they're still unfortunately falling for that content.
Yeah, I mean, everybody does. There's like so many people do. They are hard. Like scammers they're very entrepreneurial. Every scam's so different. It's sometimes hard to spot the stuff, and it's a really difficult problem to solve.
But I have numbers for you. I have numbers. Not stats. Well, stats of a kind. So this is how much it is worth. Okay. So 1.9 billion compared to this year compared to the previous year. So 1.9 billion in 2024 compared to 1 billion in 2023. And this is just in the United States.
Jesus Christ.
This is just the United States. When they do report losing money, older adults over the age of 60, substantially more than younger adults. And that's just because they have more money.
That's why they're targeted as well.
So if they're 80 and older, they reported losing on average close to $1,500 per person in terms of fraud. In their 70s, it's even less, so about 800. And the number of older adults reporting losses of 100,000 or more has increased by 3 times since 2020.
Jesus.
Okay, so this is having an impact. Now, in terms of where it's happening, things like gift cards, prepaid bank cards, these common payment methods where I put payment information into a website that shouldn't be trusted, or I hand those out. Also scams where impersonation happens. So
and that's going to be more and more common with AI now, with deepfake technology. Yeah.
Older adults are more than 6 times more likely than a young adult to report losing those as well.
Yeah.
So that's a differentiation too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're seeing this growing incidence. Older adults are obviously more likely to experience health data breaches. So we spoke about that a little bit earlier, but there's research that looks at the negative relationship between someone's age, victimization, and their increased risk of age. So as we get older, we're obviously more likely to experience some form of health breach in our data. That's just simply because we have more of that around. But as we get or continue to increase in age, so similar to experiencing fraud, the older we get, our health data is more likely to be breached.
Well, just because we have more of it in more places, and breaches are bound to happen. It's a matter of when, not if, for the most part. So the way we address this isn't at an individual level. This is at a societal and organizational level for the most part. But people then need to be trained not to give their own information away willingly, I suppose.
But we still see susceptibility with this. So it is how much information we are providing to someone else is still important. It comes back to executive functions. So we spoke about that in terms of gaming already, but understanding the potential risks that's there. So knowledge about phishing, knowledge about the potential for victimization.
Yeah.
Older adults are more aware and they're more conscious of it. So as a result of this, they are less vulnerable too. Okay. So this age relationship and our existing bias, what do you think? Like it is there.
Yeah. There's so much variation within the older adult age group. You know, my parents are really quite tech savvy, particularly my dad's extremely tech savvy. Like he uses so much technology for loads of stuff and he's in his mid-70s. He's not what I would typically think of when I think of an older person using tech. But like a lot of his friends are exactly the same. So I think there's huge variation within the group. There's some people who have never used technology, never want to, they're terrified of it, or are using it very reluctantly. There's some people who are using it, but they're very bad at it and don't know what they're doing. And then there's some people who are using it extremely competently and doing really well. And I think that the training also needs to be tailored to those kinds of groups as well, to address the gaps in skills or potential vulnerabilities. And then also we need to be aware that even people who are doing really well using tech, if they start to experience cognitive decline at some point, that may change quite quickly without you realizing it. And so like for someone, like if their kids are feeling quite confident that their parents are doing grand, they might not be asking about that stuff very much. Whereas you probably need to keep in touch about those kind of things just in case something changes.
Like decline masking through technology.
Exactly. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
But what I like is that a lot of our age biases, and one of the themes that I've tried to have in this discussion is that our bias in relation to older adults and technology is not supported by research.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It is absolutely not there. They're, to be quite honest, they tend to be better. They may have difficulties in adoption and use, but they're more skeptical.
Or more cautious, maybe is a better word than skeptical.
But I think it's okay to be cautious.
It is. It's important to be cautious online. Taking a moment before you do anything is a really good rule of thumb for the online world.
So with all of our tech use, so specifically for older adults, it has positive impacts. So assistive technologies for social isolation, independent living. There are still those negative impacts like the cybersecurity threats that we've just discussed. But these positive changes can be fostered. The negative impacts can be challenged through digital literacy training. This training is crucial from an empowerment perspective, teaching us how to use technology safely and confidently. And it's not just older adults who need that digital literacy training.
Yeah.
With the right training, the right support, older adults can thrive in this digital age. Again, I hate that term, while minimizing those digital risks.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I wasn't as aware of some of the benefits and the positives, the reduction in loneliness, etc., from it for older adults. And I think that's just fantastic. So we need to be encouraging everybody to get online.
Yeah, but I love the gaming part of it.
I love that.
I think that in terms of stereotypes has really changed.
It really is.
Its approach is not just the kind of puzzle-based games. It's like first-person shooters, racing games.
Yeah.
The literature is really interesting. So thank you for listening to me rant.
Thank you for ranting. So thank you for the positive rant. It was nice to be feeling a little bit like, oh, technology is good for something again. Because I know it is, but sometimes we forget.
Assumptions challenged.
Focus on things like trolling, etc.
So you've been listening to In Bits.
You can find us every second Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on social media. We're on Blue Sky and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube at In Bits Podcast. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love your feedback on the episodes, your experiences on any of the topics we talk about. But we'd also love to hear from you about what you want us to talk about in future, what topics you'd like to cover.
This episode was produced by Owen Hurley, who also gave us our lovely intro music.
And he edited us.
Yeah, that painful process.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep, thanks.